Hey everyone, it's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We have got Ray Fittipaldo on. TJ Watt contract situation starting to heat up. We'll talk about the details in that and also a key switch made by the Steelers defense planned for the 2025 season and how they use TJ Watt. And also Payton Wilson, after a strong rookie season, is he ready to take a step up and become a starter already? All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive Podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're your Steelers writers here. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive Podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Not only will they help you when you're injured in an accident, they also help you fight for your workers' compensation rights. Be sure to call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, TJ Watt, everyone's going to be wondering if he comes in this week for the second week of OTAs. Alex Highsmith said, quote unquote, he's very confident that TJ Watt and the Steelers will reach a deal, but no more details have come out just yet. We may have something soon here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But Ray, there are some people out there that feel like this is a very tenuous situation, that there's a lot of problems, and that the TJ Watt, he put up the Chuck and the Deuces sign earlier in the spring on his Instagram, and that maybe JJ Watt's going on Pat McAfee. Is this being an overstated issue, or is this something that is actually a real problem in your mind that could lead to issues between these two sides?
Well, you hate to jump to any conclusions, Chris, because TJ hasn't spoken out in any form. Yeah, his brother has, and we could read into the Instagram post, but we need to hear from TJ himself, and they'll practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, and we'll see if he's there for voluntary OTAs. Now, if he's not, I don't think it's a big deal. If you think back to last year, Chris, I think Cam Hayward skipped the first week of OTAs, and then he came back as a team captain, as a show of good faith to show his face. And then he was there for the remainder of spring, including minicamp. Now, TJ could do that, or TJ could just decide to show up to minicamp the week after. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But I wouldn't read too heavy into anything that transpires this week during OTAs.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing here is that, right, like there's certain guys who get a lot more leniency when it comes to OTAs, even when they're under contract, situations. You've been around for when like Troy Polamalu used to not show up for OTAs, or like I think there was the one year, I'm not sure if this was when you were covering, but I think Troy Polamalu like literally signed his extension on the plane, or as Steelers were getting on the plane to go to their week 1 game. And so like, I'm not saying that TJ Watt's situation will drag out that long, but I do think that there needs to be an understanding for like the Steelers. There's patience, there's negotiation, there's things, but this is something that they're very most likely going to get done. I find it very hard to believe that they're going to let TJ Watt walk. And I also think that, it's not a bad move either. I think it's actually a good move by the Steelers if they're going to pay him. I know there's some people out there that say, oh, you can't pay a guy like him $41 million, except then you look at what that actually constitutes in today's salary cap, where that's less than like 15% of a salary cap. And when you look at the going rate for like prime edge rushers, that very much is what the rate is. It's kind of like, a few years ago, that'd be like paying like $28 million in salary cap per year. So I know that there's some people out there that think that the Steelers shouldn't pay him all this money because $40 million just sounds like a lot, but it's not what you think it is, because the NFL is just making that much more money these days, and the salary cap's that much higher.
Yeah, and despite the slight decline in production at the end of last season, I think he's still very much in his prime, and that's a guy that really knows how to take care of his body, and there's no worries there on the Steelers' part about TJ flaming out in his early 30s or anything like that. So I think, yes, it will get done. If you look at the timeline of when the Steelers usually do these contracts, Chris, you mentioned Troy Polamalu, doing it basically on a Saturday afternoon before a Sunday game. We know TJ did it on a Friday. I can only recall 2 instances where something happened in June. That was Minka a couple years ago. I think it was right after minicamp. And then there was Marquise Pouncey before that, which happened right during minicamp. I remember that because they did a press conference after one of the practices. So pretty much everybody else, you're getting that done sometime during training camp, or you're getting it done, in the lead up to the season. So we'll see what happens with TJ. I think, you have to keep an eye on Micah Parsons in Dallas, Aiden Hutchinson in Detroit. Those 2 might get done before that. Does that change TJ's, or is TJ's offer on the table, and that's basically what the Steelers are going to offer? We'll have to see how that plays out. But, we should point out it's June 2nd now.
Yeah.
They basically have until September 2nd. They basically have 3 months to get this done. There's no time to panic if it's not done in June or even July.
Exactly. They have plenty of time to do this. And I know some people are like, well, you don't want him holding in throughout training camp. The last time he did a hold in during training camp, he tied the Michael Strahan's sack record. So I don't know how things is. Now, I will say, because we're going to do a segment next on this, I will say that, like, there are things that you'd want him to work on this year that maybe you haven't, because we're going to talk about the importance of him and Alex Highsmith flipping sides and the work that it's going to take for those 2 guys to build chemistry on different angles this year than what they normally have. But at the same time, TJ Watt's a guy who's proven he's a team first guy. He's a captain. He's a leader. He puts the team first. That is a guy that you're not too worried about, being a me guy. And so I think this makes a lot of sense. And I know that there's some people out there that are just being like, oh, well, he's turning 31. You can't. 31 is very much a prime year for edge rushers. Like, when you go back and you look at a lot of guys that play that position, and again, play that position at the high level that TJ Watt does, and take care of their body at the way that TJ Watt does. 31 is not some death knell of a year. Like, James Harrison was 32 years old when he won when he got his second first team All-Pro. He was 30 years old when he got Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah. But James Harrison was still maybe the most destructive force in the NFL at 32. So if anything, I think this could be TJ Watt entering his prime for the Steelers. And it's crazy to say because he's been in a heck of a prime. He's got 4 first teams All-Pro. So this could be a thing where, because TJ Watt's, his game's not off of quickness and speed, it's off of power, it's off of technique, it's all the things that I think translate well as you get older in the NFL. So again, I think the Steelers keeping TJ Watt and paying him to stick around is a sign that, like, hey, they still think that he's going to be one of the best edge rushers in football. Even if he's not tying Michael Strahan's sack record, every season, which he's already done once, if he's getting 15, 16 sacks, and he's part of a defensive plan, he's also part of your leadership nucleus that's keeping it, that's helping a lot of these young guys come up the right way and learn what they need to do to be the right kind of leader and the right kind of voice, and be more like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and less like George Pickens. I think all those things factor into why you want to keep him around versus trying to trade him away for maybe a first round pick. There was speculation thrown out by Mike Florio that it would just be a third round pick. And if you ever lost a player like TJ Watt for a third round pick, you should be ashamed of yourself, because I challenge you to go look at the last 20 years of first overall picks, not just first round picks, first overall picks. And there might be 2 first overall picks in the last 20 years who have had a better career than TJ Watt.
Yeah. Listen, so Chris, just have patience, fans, right? Well, stay tuned to postgazette.com. If TJ Watt talks this week, we'll have it for you at postgazette.com. We'll have it for you on our videos, and don't let it bother you. We'll have an answer sometime soon, and I think TJ's comments, whenever he does talk, I think they'll be telling.
Absolutely. We're going to keep talking about TJ Watt, though, because I want to talk about that switch that we talked about. I did a film study that should be up in the Post-Gazette today. We're going to talk about that and the impact that we see that having on the defense in 2025 and beyond. That's next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Stick with us, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, Want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. You know, they also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, you know who decides when you're better, who decides when your treatment is over, and who decides when your benefits are over. The answer might surprise you. It's actually insurance companies' doctors. They won't be on your side, but you know who will be on your side? Edgar Snyder Associates. You need to call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR because they will fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve at all times. That's Edgar Snyder Associates. Call them today, 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about a switch that the Steelers could be implementing more seriously this year with how they use TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. I did a film study on this that should be up by now on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But that's moving the sides that they typically line up on as edge rushers and kind of diversifying where they could come from to confuse offensive lines. Now, typically, TJ Watt would line up on the left side of the defense over the right tackle of the offense, while Alex Highsmith would line up over the right side of the defense, which would be the left tackle of the offense. And that's where they have been for the vast majority of their 4 years as starters together from 2021 to 2024. And in doing so, they have done amazing things. I think they have like 92 sacks together in those 4 years. They're, TJ Watt's, that in that span, that's when he's tied Strahan's record. He's been first team All-Pro. Alex Highsmith had a double-digit sack season. They've learned how to do that. But last year, we saw teams devote more and more and more efforts to slow down TJ Watt. And with him lining up on the same side of the field as he has for most of that time, it became easier to do so. And in fact, according to Pro Football Focus, by week 14 of last season, TJ Watt had been double teamed and chipped by extra blockers last year 146 times. Myles Garrett was the next closest player, and he had only been done so 96 times. So people were almost we're almost being 50% more likely to chip block TJ Watt as he was trying to come off the ball and attack the quarterback, which shows that teams are trying to do that. And so by moving them around, the Steelers are trying to find a way to free him up more and confuse offenses more. And that's something that Alex Highsmith did tell us last week, that the Steelers are actively planning to be a part of their defense.
Yeah, this is a chance for Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin to get very creative. I think Dick LeBeau really excelled at this early on, like in the first years of Blitzburg, way back in the 90s. Like if you have TJ line up on the right side, for instance, okay, and people say, okay, well, he's not on the left side, he's on the right side. Let's shift a tight end or let's shift a running back over to account for him. The Steelers could have TJ Watt drop into coverage and they could overload the other side. And then you're all of a sudden, there's a blitzer who's not picked up, and you have an easy sack, or you confuse him, you get an easy throwaway. Now, you're not going to want to do that all the time because you want TJ Watt rushing, but it's a cat and mouse game, right? Like you want to get them thinking, and then you want to react off that. So that really hasn't been a big part of Austin and Tomlin's defense the last couple of years. TJ Watt has dropped on occasion. I remember the interception against the Rams that kind of turned that game around a couple of years ago. But for the most part, I would say he's rushing like 90 to 95% of the time, Chris. And I think, that's the same with, probably with Alex too. So if they could switch that up, maybe get back to that old school 3-4 defense where maybe you're bringing rushers from all angles. I think that could help them. But even if it just frees up TJ for, an easier matchup on a different offensive tackle or something like that, I think it's something that's worth being explored here during the 2025 season.
It should be explored. I mean, and here's the thing. The Steelers did recognize this was a problem last year. It's just when those guys have been so entrenched on the sides that they're comfortable from, it's tough to implement that as a bigger staple change and make that big change in season when every week you're cooling off from your last game, you're letting your muscles heal, you're doing your film study, you're studying the next opponent. Okay, how are we going to play them? How are we going to do this? And trying to make that a regular thing for your defense. The Steelers did it only 11 snaps last year, but there were 2 games where they did it more than others, and that was the Giants game and the Bengals game, the first Bengals game. And in both those games, TJ Watt got 2 sacks. Now, it's important to note, just doing the flip of moving them, that doesn't just, it's not like Madden where you can just say, hey, I'm just going to flip these players and it's going to be genius and it's going to move like that or anything. But what it does is it forces the offensive line to communicate more, which can lead to more, when they're communicating more, that leads to more chances for mistakes where, the guard may have a check to the tackle. We're like, we're TJ's on the other side. We're not adjusting out here. And as they're doing that, they also have to be worrying about where the blitz could be coming from. Could Patrick Queen be rushing? Could this be happening? Where's Cam Hayward? And then the play clock's running. And because football's a fast game, this is what speeds up the mental clocks and leads to more errors. And as I show in the film study, that's part of the objective. Like even on plays where TJ Watt lined up on the other side, on the opposite side of what he's used to, it wasn't sometimes TJ Watt that was freed up. It was someone else because of a mistake. And then when TJ Watt was on his normal side, sometimes the efforts of he's back over there now, that is also enough to confuse offensive lines. And now, to your point, I think you bring up a good point with Dick LeBeau, and I think Keith Butler did this a bit more than Terrell Austin has been doing it. But the flexibility and the versatility of where guys can blitz from, where guys can line up to create pressure, that's something that I think can absolutely be done more in this Steelers defense, that maybe they didn't do it for a while because they felt like they didn't need to, because they were getting after the quarterback wherever they lined up for a while.
Yeah, and how often did you see back in those days Levon Kirkland, Kendrell Bell coming on blitzes with the cross-dog blitzes, crossing over the gap to the other side, and how difficult that was for teams to pick up. No, the Steelers have done that on occasion. Roberts would do that sometimes. I think Queen maybe had a sack or 2 last year, but Steelers have the athletes at inside linebacker, Chris. You got Patrick Queen, and you got Payton Wilson. If Payton Wilson is on the field more often this year, you got a lot of flexibility with how you want to deploy him. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think the main takeaway of all this talk about TJ and Alex switching sides is the Steelers don't want to be as predictable. And I think for the last couple of years, they kind of relied on, we got TJ, we got Alex, we got Cam. We're just going to beat you straight up. And sometimes when teams scheme you up and they decide they're going to take a guy like TJ out of the game, it's advantage offense. So the Steelers have to get back that advantage.
They do have to take back that advantage. And if you want to see more of the plays that I'm talking about and the breakdowns, check it out in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It published this morning, post-gazette.com. Steelers film study, the much-needed plan for TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith in 2025, where we get to more into in detail about the stats of this, the plays, and you can see some of the plays that I've highlighted and drawn up the schematics for how it gave them advantages in the few times that they did it last season. But you brought up a name there, that Ray, that I think is very interesting, and a guy that you wrote about last week. That's Payton Wilson. He was just a 4th-round rookie out of NC State last year. Picked up at the linebacker position. Now he looks like he could be the starter next to Patrick Queen. We'll talk about his impact on things next here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you also by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind, step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training, it's about living the values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program led by 3rd-degree black belt instructor who builds confidence, strength, flexibility, and real technique. Head down to the UFC Gym at the Waterfront or Market Square to learn about the exclusive 3-month introductory package today at UFC Gym Pittsburgh. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's pick it up with where you were talking about. You wrote about Payton Wilson last week because he was getting those reps as far as, and also I apologize, he's a 3rd-round pick, not a 4th-round pick. That was basically McCormick, who was the 4th-round pick last year. But Payton Wilson, a guy who I thought by most measures had a good rookie season at off-ball linebacker, had that brilliant interception against Lamar Jackson in the first Ravens game, showed the potential to fly sideline to sideline, a lot of that athleticism that we saw at NC State from his years there. What's the sense you've been getting of what his role might be this year from seeing him early at OTAs?
Well, at least in the first week of OTAs, he was out there in the base defense alongside Patrick Queen, and it seems like they're going to take a long look at that here this spring. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to, carry over into the fall, and that he is going to be a 3-down backer, but that is the next progression for him, Chris. You mentioned he had a really good rookie season, 78 tackles.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 1 interception. He also had a fumble recovery that was returned for a touchdown against the Bengals. So, and that was done in only 45% of the defensive snaps. I mean, 78 tackles playing half the game. If you extrapolate that out over, the course of a full season, playing, say, 90% of the snaps or even 100% of the snaps alongside Patrick Queen, then you're talking about, 120, 130 tackles, which would be,
right.
Competing with Patrick Queen for the team lead. So the production was there. He did add a little bit of weight this offseason in anticipation of that move. Not a lot. I think he added 5 or 7 pounds. I think he's up to 242, 243 now. He says he doesn't want to lose his speed, and that's his greatest asset, right? You
right.
Think about how many tackles that guy had in third down situations where he's running to the ball and he's getting guys on the ground, getting tight ends or running backs on the ground short of the line of gain. So that's his game. I don't think he wants to change too much, but he does want a shot at this, and we'll see if it happens come September.
And I think it's a different time in the NFL, right? Where it used to be the Mac and the Buck linebackers. You had your James Ferrier, and then you had your Larry Foote, and eventually it was Lawrence Timmons and James Ferrier. But there was always a faster linebacker and a slower linebacker that was more of a run stuffer. And now in today's NFL, you kind of want 2 fast linebackers who can also stuff the run because of just how versatile the league is, right? You need guys that can cover tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, but you also need those guys to also be, gritty run stuffers. And I think that's where Payton Wilson might need to grow the most, is being that kind of run stuffer who can take on blockers in the hole. But he has the frame and the explosiveness to do that. Like he's not just a fast guy. He's tall. He's long. He's got the arms, and he also has the strength to take on guys. And so it'll be interesting to me to see how his role with Patrick Queen develops and how aggressive they want both these guys to play, because, on top of stuffing the run, like you brought up earlier, rushing the passer is a big part of that too, because both those guys are good downhill blitzers. When they get going, they're quick to the ball, and they're tough for linemen to catch up to because they're because of how quick they are. If the Steelers can unlock a true multifaceted version of Payton Wilson, where both him and Patrick Queen are essentially triple threats, being run stuffers, coverage linebackers, and pass rushers, that's the kind of stuff that can give you a ton more flexibility on top of, where TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith might line up this season for where pressure might be coming from.
Yeah, listen, let's face it, a lot of this stuff will be based on game-to-game matchups as well, right? Listen, the Steelers sign Malik Harrison, and they're not paying him chump change. They're paying him $5 million a year, to be a run-stuffing linebacker. So maybe against the Ravens, Malik Harrison is a bigger part of it. But maybe against other teams that maybe aren't as run-heavy, then maybe Payton Wilson is in there in base. So it doesn't have to be, decided at the beginning of the season how it's going to play out. You could actually go week to week because, Chris, the Steelers have options at inside linebacker. If Cole Holcomb, we should say, looked pretty good moving around during the first week of OTAs, if he's back, then you have all kinds of different options, right? He could be a part of that rotation as well. So, a lot has to be played out. We have to see how Cole, responds to the knee and how that goes. But the Steelers do have options, and I think by signing Harrison in free agency, they do have a backup plan. Listen, if Payton Wilson isn't a good matchup for a team like the Ravens, then they just go to Malik Harrison or Holcomb, and they can have that figured out.
Right, and I think that's the thing here. Right, this might be the most flexible off-ball linebacker group that they've had in some time. When you think about Patrick Queen as your number one, Payton Wilson potentially your number two, Malik Harrison, you have a thumper like Malik Harrison as your as part of that secondary rotation, and then Cole Holcomb, who you signed to be basically the Patrick Queen a few years ago. That could be a really deep rotation of inside linebackers, maybe deeper than we've seen for the Steelers in a very long time, maybe more than 10 years, because typically when they've had, good linebackers, they had Ryan Shazier and Vince Williams, it was kind of that, like when Shazier went down, they were in a piece to try to find an answer there, and that was not easy for them to solve. But here you have depth where if you lose Patrick Queen and Payton Wilson becomes one, Cole Holcomb can step into that role. Or like you said, if you're just having matchups problems and you need a big thumper up in there, you can throw in Malik Harrison. I think this could be a unique opportunity for the Steelers defense this year with this group to pair well with the depth that they need to have across the board.
Yeah, let's face it, lack of depth has hurt them at that position the last couple of years. You mentioned Shazier and Vince Williams, but how about the year Cole went down? And you remember there were inside linebackers getting signed left and right, sign them for 2 weeks, cut them, bring somebody else in. I mean, they even brought in Jalen Smith for a time, and I think they had him on their practice squad for a while. I think that was 2 years ago when they had all those injuries at inside linebacker. So, yeah, it's good to have depth. And it's good to have some versatility in how you want to deploy those guys. Yes, it could be a very crowded room if all those guys are healthy. It might be an embarrassment of riches. But in the end, Chris, this is the NFL. There are going to be injuries, and if all those guys stay healthy, they will be well positioned to navigate those types of injuries this fall.
Absolutely. We'll keep it here with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the North Shore Drive podcast because OTAs do resume tomorrow. Myself, Ray, Brian, I believe Jerry, and Jason Mackey. We'll have a full team of reporters there covering OTAs. Will TJ Watt show up and we get to talk to him about his contract negotiation? Will Aaron Rodgers ever finally show up? All those things we'll keep you posted with here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, the show comes on every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video to enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll be back Wednesday after the first day of the second week of OTAs, covering the Steelers right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.